Alright, let's do a quick recap. Year 750. Umayyad Caliphate? Very big. Umayyads not nice to non-Arab Muslims. Non-Arab Muslims come together as Abbasids and fight Umayyads. Umayyads get defeated, Abbasids take over the Caliphate, and the Umayyad family gets genocided. Many people die, and we are left with Prince Abd Al-Rahman and his loyal freed slave men Berber. Oh, and they are sad because literally everyone who was with them died. All caught up? Very nice. Let's continue the show. Historically Facts, Part 7 and a half, and Chapter 3. The prince and Berber's goal was clear: get to Al-Andalus to gather support and to rally up an army. But how will they get there? Basically, they had three choices. First, they could sneak through the Eastern Roman Empire and through Europe to get to Spain that way. But that would mean they had to face first of all the Romans, who held a burning hate to anything Arab, and then pass through the Christian European world, who were anything but friendly to the Muslims, because, you know, they are actively invading it from Spain. This route, being roughly 5,000 kilometers long, would take around 300 days if we take into account the need to scavenge for food and avoiding detection. The second option was to cross through the sea. Why bother risking getting caught by evil Romans and Abbasids if they can just hop on a boat? Well, for starters, they had to find a boat. And not just any, they needed one that is super sturdy and made for long-distance deep-sea voyaging. Good luck finding that at a time where basically everyone sticks to the coast and ships are generally not sturdy enough to get into open seas. But maybe they find the genie stuck in a lamp, and instead of wishing to teleport to Spain, they ask for a beautiful long-distance ship. Stupid. Next up, they would need a crew. And for a journey and ship like this, they would need around 10 to 20 people to operate it. Good luck funding them, not to mention finding those who won't stab Abd Al-Rahman in the back because he's an Umayyad prince. Then they had to sail out. That's a problem. Then they needed to sail to ports to get food. That's a problem. And then there were pirates. That is a problem. But if they were to go for this route, it would take max 20 days, which is a lot faster than 300 days. The final option was option C, walk along Africa. Though it's definitely the longest route with approximately 350 days of travel, it is the safest. Kinda. Depends if you are a sweet talker or not. Why? Well, before the Arabs conquered Northern Africa, it was home to the Berbers. Who are the Berbers? Well, factually, they are everyone who was here before the Arabs arrived. But to give you a better idea of who they are and what they look like, obviously because it's Africa, there were black people, but the majority of them were lighter-skinned European lookalikes, due to the Roman Empire and the Byzantine Empire having control of this region before the Arabs arrived, allowing plenty of white people to arrive and settle. Either way, the Berbers were all part of smaller communities, or tribes, and because of that, they were pretty easy to defeat and conquer by the Umayyad invaders. But conquering something isn't often as easy as governing it. Cue in the unfair taxes. In part 1 of this two-part series, I also mentioned this unfair tax system towards non-Arab Muslims. You know, the one that caused the Abbasid revolution and basically ignited the entire fall of the Umayyads? Well, some people kept commenting that actually it was fair. Oh, is it? Conveniently blurred name of the commenter. Let's talk about them. On the right side is a Muslim Arab. On the left side, a non-Muslim Berber. They are both farmers and both own their own piece of land, and after working hard all year, they each made a total of $100. Sweet. But before they can enjoy that money, they have to pay their taxes. Yeah, that's right. Even 1500 years ago, the evil system existed. The taxes for non-Muslims were different from those who were affiliated with Islam. Let's start with the Muslim. First of all, they had to pay the zakat, which is a religious tax of 2.5% of all your wealth that then gets spent on improving the lives of less fortunate Muslims. Quote, Muslims, not Berbers. Then, if they made big money from farming, the Muslims also had to give up 10% of the farming profits, also known as ushr, totaling to $12.50 a year. Moving over to the other side, we have the non-Muslim. Instead of paying zakat and ushr, they had to pay the jizya and kharaj. The jizya was a tax Berbers had to pay for not having to go to the military. Well, why don't they just go to the military then to avoid paying this tax? Let's see the requirements. Male? Check. Masculine? Check. Muslim? The non-Muslims couldn't go to their army even if they wanted to, so they had to pay the tax whether they liked it or not, 10%. Secondly, there is the garage. If you own a land, there is a 20% tax for that, and sometimes it goes up to 50%. But for the benefit of the doubt, let's keep it at a low 20%. That's a final $30 on the left and $12.50 on the right. Does it still sound fair? Even if the Berber converted to Islam, they often still had to pay the old taxes, including the new ones, even if they were told they didn't have to. So, Mr. Blurry Name, how fair was it really, huh? If I asked this Berber, he would say it's definitely unfair. And it was so unfair, in fact, that before the Abbasids started their revolution, the Berbers were already at it. Usually these Berber tribes were very divided, which made them quite weak opponents. But now that they had a common enemy, the greedy Umayyads, they had a reason to combine and start a revolution. The revolt, starting in current-day Morocco, gained widespread popularity among the other Berber tribes and spread to the bottom of Al-Andalus all the way to modern-day Tunisia. The Umayyads obviously didn't like what happened and sent a massive army to teach those rebels a lesson. But somewhat ironically, they lost decisively against those who they didn't want to recruit into their army, resulting in the Umayyads massively losing their influence on most of the northern part of Africa and even some key cities and fortresses in Spain. This was embarrassing for the Umayyads to say the least. But to tie this back in with Abd Al-Rahman's story, and with option C, which is where this whole segment started with, because the Berber revolt happened semi-recently at the time Abd Al-Rahman had to flee, Africa and Al-Andalus were in a struggle for power. After the Berbers defeated the Umayyads, they all realized that now that there is no common enemy anymore, they have no reason to be united. I mean, it would be rational to use this new alliance to create the great Berber Empire that would stand for centuries. But who cares about long-term pleasure if you can result in short-term pleasure, aka kill each other. So Africa right now is basically all about infighting, while the Abbasids tried to keep their control of it. And Al-Andalus was all about Umayyads being sad that they lost their homeland, with Christians taking revenge upon them in the north, Berbers being Berberians in the south, and the rebellious governor trying to take the peninsula for himself. Would be a shame if someone with a righteous claim to power would show up and take it for himself. But yeah, getting to Al-Andalus through Africa wasn't going to be easy. But that wasn't specifically a bad thing, because it also meant that the Abbasids couldn't go there easily either. Anyway, enough beating around the bush and state of the world updates. Yalla habibi, go take revenge and make a name out of yourself. The journey to Al-Andalus ended up taking way longer than just 350 days. As a matter of fact, it took a whopping 5 years before Abd Al-Rahman and Badr arrived at the peninsula. What he exactly did in all that time isn't too clear, but there was a notable event. Because let's talk about Abd Al-Rahman. No, not our Abd Al-Rahman, but this Abd Al-Rahman. He was the governor of Refugee, which is roughly modern-day Tunisia. And he wanted to establish his own rules, just like that governor did. People weren't really original at the time, okay? He tried to be Mr. Nice Guy to the Abbasids in an attempt to somehow convince them that they should definitely give him his own country for completely free, which they politely declined. So then, out of spite, he formally invited every person the Abbasids despised, including Abd Al-Rahman, to stay in his region. So Abd Al-Rahman, during his journey, went there to take a breather and to improve his relations with the Berbers. What, you think he's just going to find an army laying around just like that? Nuh-uh, connections are everything. And luckily for our main protagonist, his mom just happened to be a Berber herself, meaning Abd Al-Rahman was partly a Berber too. The fact he was kinda one of them, that as an Umayyad he had a claim for the throne, that they both hated the Abbasids with a passion, that Abd al-Rahman was a charismatic talker, and the fact he promised prestigious positions in his new empire that he was going to conquer, meant that it kinda made sense to rally behind his cause. You know who wasn't behind Abd al-Rahman anymore? Abd al-Rahman, the governor. Hearing how more and more people started to rally behind the prince, plus the fact he was from a way more prestigious family than the governor himself was, made Abd al-Rahman worry that Abd al-Rahman was going to do something sinister. And this time, it doesn't matter which Abd al-Rahman you have in mind, they both thought that. PTSD incoming, because that night, while the prince stayed in a camp of Berbers, the governor suddenly decided that he can't allow the prince to stay, and ordered his henchmen to get rid of him. This time, Badr wasn't around to save the prince, but the chieftain's wife was. According to sources, Abd al-Rahman and Badr only managed to hide from the governor's hunters because the chieftain's wife hid them under her, quote, personal belongings. See, it's moments like this where as a historian, you're allowed to make educated guesses to fill in the blanks. So we can decide that they hid under a conveniently placed Victorian-style dress. And it was pink, with ponies. and glitter. Ah, the power of gaps in history. When the duo realized they were no longer welcome, they hastily packed their bags and continued their journey westwards to Morocco. After 5 long years of travel, Abd Al-Rahman had finally arrived in Morocco. He was welcomed with love and offered protection against the few Berber tribes who weren't that happy that he was here. The first thing Abd Al-Rahman did was to say goodbye to Badr. Though not for too long. Though the two have been together since the start of their journey, it was time to split ways. Abd Al-Rahman ordered Badr to cross the ocean and to start looking for support in Al-Andalus, while the prince himself would stay in Morocco to look for support there. And with determination in their hearts, and probably a slight tear in their eyes, the iconic duo split their ways to assure their future. I guess now would be a good time to introduce the governor. Meet Yusuf Abd Al-Rahman, yes seriously again, Al-Fihri. However, we will just call him Yusuf Al-Fihri. He was from the same family that the governor Abd Al-Rahman was, and he was well aware of the upcoming arrival of the Umayyad prince. Now, as opposed to his idiotic cousin, Yusuf had already planned what to do with Abd Al-Rahman. He knew his peninsula was a mess and that the people urged the leader who would bring order to the existing chaos. The chaos that most Andalusians attributed to the governor himself. Letting the popular and more prestigious Abd Al-Rahman freely walk around the peninsula would mean certain defeat for the governor. So he had 2 options. See how we are bringing this back again? Very clever, I know. Option A. Attack. Gather the army and crush Abd Al-Rahman before he can get too much support. After that, quietly pull the rug over the whole refugee prince story and blame the Abbasids for killing Abd Al-Rahman somewhere during his escape. It's a flawless plan. If it weren't for the Christians rebelling Berbers and the northern Andalusians rebelling right as the prince is about to arrive. That leaves us with plan B. Woman. What is the #1 thing that men like to do? Marrying someone's daughter. Brilliant idea, Yusuf. Tell the prince that if he stops claiming the throne to get revenge on the Abbasids, that he would get to marry a daughter. Let's see how that goes. My prince, the remaining Umayyad people are here to join your cause. And so are the Berbers and other local powers who dislike the governor. As a matter of fact, the southern regions peacefully and completely surrendered themselves to you and call you the rightful emir of the peninsula. After politely declining the woman, there was only one final way for Yusuf to stop Abd Al-Rahman from dethroning him. Go for option A anyway. As Abd Al-Rahman's influence grew in the region, Yusuf had no time to waste and marched straight to the prince's army that was well on its way to the provincial capital of Al-Andalus, Cordoba. Abd Al-Rahman, also known as the rebel leader among the ranks of the Al-Fihris, had an army around the size of 3,000 men, consisting of Berbers, Umayyads and local Andalusians. This was nothing compared to the governor, who came walking in with over 10,000 well-equipped soldiers. As the citizens of Cordoba mounted their walls to witness the 2 armies in a standoff, it was looking to be a one-sided slaughter of the smaller rebel army, where the Umayyad dream would die off once and for all. However, as the sunset lowered and lowered, both armies realized how tired they were after their exhausting journey. So in classic ancient warfare tactics, both armies set up camp somewhat close to each other to catch some sleep and to delay the fight for when it wasn't pitch black outside. But this time, it's not Abd Al-Rahman getting jumped while trying to sleep. This time, the jumper is Abd Al-Rahman himself. In the dead of night, Abd Al-Rahman and his forces attacked the poorly defended camp. Chaos followed as the half-asleep Fihris didn't even have time to get into armor before Abd Al-Rahman stood in the entrance of their tents. A tsunami of fire spread through the camps as the Al-Fihris desperately tried to regroup and defend themselves. Abd Al-Rahman and Badr, knowing exactly how it is to be on the receiving end of a midnight raid, skillfully targeted the supply and command posts of the Al-Fihri setup, destroying everything and all the battle plans the governor had prepared. Then, before the Al-Fihris could properly defend themselves, Abd Al-Rahman and his forces retreated to their own camp and slept out the night. The following day, after assessing the damage done by the Umayyad prince, the governor was fueled with rage and decided he has been toyed with long enough. He set off his army to take revenge for last night. But here, he found not only the well-rested army of Abd Al-Rahman ready to settle the deal, but also his own generals and soldiers standing in front of him. And there, it hit the governor. The tents and sleeping Alferi soldiers were merely a secondary target that night. The real target was the army's morale. And it was absolutely shattered. Before Yusuf Alferi could comprehend the state his army was in, it was already too late. Abd Al-Rahman, leading the army himself, rushed into the sleep-deprived soldiers and trampled each and everyone in their path. It was an outcome the people of Cordoba never expected, but oh so wished for. The Umayyad prince's image was set, and the people of the capital welcomed him with open arms. The governor, or well, ex-governor, ended up getting captured that morning. But instead of being beheaded, which, like you know, was customary at the time, Abd Al-Rahman offered Yusuf peace in an attempt to show the rest of Al-Andalus how merciful the prince was, even against his political opponents. But the governor overplayed his hand. He declined the offer and escaped to the north, where he immediately started to rally up an army to take back his throne. But before he could mobilize and take revenge, the supporters of Abd Al-Rahman already caught up with him and delivered his head to the prince who was still in Cordoba. As he looked the deceased governor in his dead eyes, Abd Al-Rahman knew now was the time. And in the year 756, 6 years after his caliphate was taken from him, he revived it and established the Umayyad dynasty, also known as the Umayyad Caliphate of Cordoba. Finally, he could take revenge on the Abbasids and slowly but painfully take back all that was taken from him. Or so he wished. Turns out, being a ruler of a massive country, especially a newly established one, takes a lot of effort and time. And before Abd Al-Rahman knew, it was time for him to pass away. He never got to take revenge on the Abbasids, though he did repel many of their attacks in the following years. His emirate became a safe haven for political opponents of the Abbasids, and Cordoba specifically became one of the most prosperous cities during the medieval times. But as years turned into centuries, the Umayyad pride and the story of our heroic refugee prince slowly and surely turned forgotten. And the country in the 11th century split off into many smaller factions, which opened a huge opportunity for the Holy Templars to take back the peninsula. Decisive blow after blow pushed the Muslims out of the peninsula, and officially in the 15th century, the Reconquista came to an end. And all that remains of Abd Al-Rahman is a statue in a coastal city. The city where he entered the peninsula. Though it isn't clear what happened to Berber, we like to think they stayed together after all that happened, living a long life with his prince, ruler, and most importantly, his friend. Oh, by the way, this guy that tried to kill Abd Al-Rahman is actually a Patreon supporter. If you want to get your own doodly in a video as well, check out the Patreon, and thanks for watching. Goodbye!